A common problem in an office setting is that when you send out a template for people to fill out, when they send them back to you, then you have a ton of different files, but they're all in the same template, but they're not consolidated. So I'm going to show you how to solve that problem with a macro where we'll import them all and consolidate them into a single workbook. So in this example scenario, I've sent out a template and all the departments have returned me the template filling out their budget request for the year. So I have 30 items. And so every one of these files is a template that I sent out, which just has particular department number, department name, and the budget request and the justifications for them and the amounts that are there. And so every department sent me these back. And so I have 30 of these now. Well, 30 individual ones is going to be really hard to go through. So let's put those all into a single workbook. So the first thing I'm going to do is open Excel and just go ahead and save me a new workbook that's completely separate. And I'm just going to save it as an XLSM file because I'm going to put my macro in there. And I'm just going to put it in the temp folder for now. And I'm going to call it combining budget requests. So now I have a macro or workbook that I'm going to store all my macros. So now I have my workbook that's going to store all of the data. And to begin with, I'm just going to create the table headers that I'm going to need. So there I have it. Now I'm going to have, this is my table that I'm going to store all the data. I'm going to read those files and pull the data in line by line. So to begin, I'm going to go to the Developer tab, go to Visual Basic, and I'm going to go ahead and insert a module. And I'm going to rename this my import module. And I'm just going to call it my macro or the sub import data. And so the first thing I'm going to do is get the folder where the budget requests are. And I'm going to be ensure that that folder exists so I can move forward. Okay, so there I'm putting the actual directory, the full spelled out directory into a variable called folder or S folder because I'm going to reference that later. And there's a function called dir, which is essentially a directory, or it can tell you if a file exists. And so essentially I'm putting it into this dir folder or dir command, and I'm telling it to look for a directory because by default, dir is going to look for a file. So if I just put this in there, it's going to be like, well, that's not a file, and it would come back blank. But if it's a VB directory, it's looking for a directory. If it's a directory, it'll actually come up with that name. If it's not a directory, it'll be blank. And so that's where I just give a message to the user and exit out if it doesn't exist. So the next thing I'm going to do is declare all my variables that I'm going to use. Okay, and so this, my OBook variable is going to be the workbook that I open. That's going to be all of the different files. So every time I open it, I'm going to put it into that variable. I'm going to make that variable the OBook so I can actually manipulate it. Worksheet is going to be the worksheet in that workbook, and it's always the first worksheet. And then combined sheet is going to be the sheet in this workbook. It's going to be this sheet right here. Go back in there. And then I row is the sheet as the row that I'm on in this sheet. So I'm going to start at 1 because in that first time I increment it's going to be 2, and so like that's going to be the row that I'm on. And so now the next thing to do is actually to go through the files in that S folder variable. Okay, so far what I'm doing is I take the files that are XLSX within that folder, and I'm doing dir without any specifier in the parameter here. So I'm going to look for files, and this is going to pull the first file by default. And so then I'm just going to set a loop, and as long as I'm going to go through, it's going to find every file. It's going to loop through every single file within that folder. Now, and the first thing I'm going to do is actually open the workbook. I'm going to use at workbooks.open to open the workbook. And then I'm going to set my worksheet variable as the one sheet, the sheets 1, which is the first indexed sheet. Now, the next thing I got to do is actually start reading data from those sheets. And now this was a template I sent out, so the structure should be easily readable and it should be the same for every workbook. So I'm going to do that now. Okay, so here now I'm putting the department number and the department name. So I'm essentially reading cells B1 and B2 of that first index sheet. And because that's where the department number and name should be based on the template that I sent out. Then the next thing I do is I find the first row of entered data. And so when I pull up a template, so B1 and B2 are this. Well, the row 3 is going to be my headers. Well, technically, row 4 should be the first entered data. And so I essentially go to the very last cell and then go Excel up. So kind of like hitting, if I'm down here and I hold control and press up, that's what this osheet.rows.count.end Excel up row is going to get me. So I end row on that first one should, for this particular workbook, would get me 6 because it's going to start though, go up, and it's going to find that row to 6. And then if I go back to the code, so I know my end row is 6, so I'm going to start at 4, go to 6. And so that's where I'm going to loop through 4 to 6, and and that's why it varies, because each department might have a different number. And if they never didn't enter anything, then technically this would go to 3, this value would go to 3, and this for loop would never even start, because from 4 to 3, well, you can't go from 4 to 3, and so it'll just go skip to the next, and it'll skip down here. And then essentially on my combined sheet, I'm going to create a row, add a row. I'm going to put my department number. I'm going to put my department name, and then in just C, D, E, F, which correspond to A, B, C, D, E, F here. And then I'm going to pull the values from A, B, C, and D from these workbooks. And so that's going to be A, B, C, and D. And so I'm going to read from 4 to 6 on this one, 4 to 6. In my CDEF, I'm going to put ABCD's value. And then after I'm done go through that, I get all of the data. I'm going to close the workbook, and putting false is the actual save changes, because if I open it, I don't want to save any changes. I'm just opening it and reading it. I'm going to make sure false is set here so it doesn't try to save any changes. And then this workbook.activate, that's going to be where I'm actually stored here. And so like running this macro from, it's just to make sure I get back to this workbook, and then S file name is going to go to the next file, because once I set dir here, it's going to know that that's an array of files. And so every time I hit dir, it's going to go to the next one. And then once it reaches the end, this will return a blank, and then the blank will cause this to exit out, and then it'll be done. Okay, so now I'm going to close that out, and then I'm just going to come over here. I'm going to snap these just so we can watch it go. So if I'm in this macro and I hit play, it's going to open up each individual macro or each individual workbook and start pasting the data in. As you can see, it's kind of actually adding them in there. And this might take a while, depending on your speed of your computer. Sometimes opening and closing can go very fast. Sometimes opening and closing can go really slow. And the number of files also plays a huge part into that. So if you've got 100 departments, or you're trying to combine 100 files, this can take a long time. Okay, and so now it's done. I'm going to pull this up, and now you can see that it combined all of the departments all together. And so there you have it. So this macro was fairly simple. Now I've combined them, and it was not even that many lines of code, but just with that many lines of code, I was able to combine all 30 workbooks into one, saving you multiple time, especially. And then if somebody decides to update one, you can actually just update their file here, run this macro again, and then you have them all again. You don't have to worry about inserting them in specific rows or anything like that. So writing a macro to do this can save you a ton of time. So that's a simple way to combine all the files. Now in part 2 of this video, I'm going to show you how to take this to the pro level, and when a user updates a file, where you can just click a button to import a single file, and it'll actually find the different records and replace them. But for right now, that's it. And if you like this, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.